Babylon is one of the most legendary cities in human history. For thousands of years, its name has been associated with power, wealth, innovation, and mystery. Located in the fertile region between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, Babylon rose in the heart of Mesopotamia, a land often called the cradle of civilization. Around 600 BC, the city reached the height of its power and influence under the rule of King Nebuchadnezzar II, becoming one of the most magnificent urban centers the ancient world had ever seen. To understand Babylon at its peak, however, we must begin much earlier, long before its famous walls, temples, and gardens dominated the landscape. The region where Babylon would rise had already been inhabited for thousands of years. Early agricultural communities settled along the rivers of Mesopotamia because the land was fertile and water was abundant. These rivers flooded seasonally, leaving behind rich soil that allowed crops such as barley and wheat to grow. Over time, small villages became towns, and towns evolved into city-states. Among the earliest great civilizations of the region were the Sumerians, who built cities such as Ur, Uruk, and Eridu. Estas cidades desenvolveram a escrita, religia organizada, reads complexes de comercio e sistemas de lei. Their innovations laid the foundation for future civilizations across the region. Babylon itself began as a relatively small settlement along the Euphrates River sometime during the 3rd millennium BC. For many centuries, it was not particularly powerful compared to other cities in Mesopotamia. That changed dramatically around 1800 BC when a ruler named Hammurabi came to power. Hammurabi transformed Babylon from a modest city into the capital of a growing empire. His most famous legacy is the Code of Hammurabi, one of the earliest known systems of written law. Carved into stone and displayed publicly, the code established rules for justice, trade, property, family life, and punishment. The principle of an eye for an eye came from this legal system, reflecting the idea that law should create balance and order in society. Under Hammurabi, Babylon became a political and cultural center of Mesopotamia. Trade routes passed through the city, connecting it to distant regions such as Anatolia, the Persian Gulf, and the Levant. Merchants carried metals, timber, textiles, and precious stones, while farmers from surrounding lands brought grain and livestock. Over time, Babylon developed into a bustling urban environment where commerce, religion, and government intersected. However, Babylon's power did not remain constant. After Hammurabi's dynasty declined, the city experienced centuries of conquest and political change. Various empires controlled the region, including the Kassites and later the Assyrians. Despite these shifts in power, Babylon remained culturally important. Its temples, scholars, and traditions continued to influence the entire region. By the 7th century BC, the balance of power in Mesopotamia began to change again. The Assyrian Empire, which had dominated the Near East for generations, weakened due to internal struggles and external conflicts. A new Babylonian leader named Nabopolassar seized the opportunity to rebel against Assyrian rule. With the help of allies, including the Medes, he successfully overthrew the Assyrian Empire and established the Neo-Babylonian Empire. His son, Nebuchadnezzar II, would become the most famous king in Babylon's history. When Nebuchadnezzar II took the throne in 605 BC, he inherited a powerful but still developing empire. Over the next 4 decades, he expanded and strengthened Babylonian dominance across the region. His armies conquered territories throughout the Levant, including the Kingdom of Judah. Historical records and biblical texts describe how Jerusalem was captured, and many of its inhabitants were taken into exile in Babylon. These events would later become known as the Babylonian Captivity, a moment that deeply shaped Jewish history and religious tradition. Yet Nebuchadnezzar II was not remembered only for military conquest. He was também dos maiores construtores do mundo antigo. Determined to transform Babylon into the most magnificent city on earth, he launched an ambitious program of construction and urban development. Under his rule, Babylon's walls were expanded and reinforced, tornando-se algumas das mais formidáveis estruturas defensivas já construídas na antiguidade. Ancient historians described multiple layers of massive walls surrounding the city, with towers and gates protecting its entrances. The most famous of these entrances was the Ishtar Gate. Built with brilliant blue glazed bricks and decorated with images of dragons and bulls, the gate served as a monumental entrance to the inner city. The animals depicted on the gate symbolized the gods Marduk and Adad, reflecting the deep connection between Babylonian religion and political authority. Beyond the gate stretched the Processional Way, a grand avenue used during religious festivals and ceremonies. Every year during the New Year, festival statues of the gods were carried along this road in elaborate rituals celebrating the renewal of cosmic order and the protection of the city. At the center of Babylon stood the temple complex dedicated to Marduk, the chief god of the Babylonian pantheon. The temple was surrounded by administrative buildings, courtyards, and sacred spaces where priests conducted rituals and offerings. Nearby rose a massive ziggurat, a stepped pyramid-like structure that towered above the city skyline. Many historians believe this structure may have inspired later stories of the Tower of Babel described in biblical tradition. The ziggurat symbolized the connection between heaven and earth, serving both as a religious monument and as a visible statement of Babylon's power. One of the most famous legends associated with Babylon is that of the Hanging Gardens. Ancient writers described a spectacular garden filled with terraces of trees, flowers, and flowing water rising above the city walls. According to tradition, Nebuchadnezzar ordered the gardens built for his queen, who longed for the green mountains of her homeland. Engineers supposedly designed a complex system of irrigation to lift water from the Euphrates River to the upper terraces, allowing plants to grow in the dry climate of Mesopotamia. Although modern archaeologists still debate whether the Hanging Gardens truly existed in Babylon or in another city such as Nineveh, the story reflects the immense reputation Babylon held in the imagination of the ancient world. At its height around 600 BC, Babylon was one of the largest cities on Earth. Estimates suggest that its population may have reached several 100,000 people. The city was organized with wide streets, canals, residential districts, markets, and temples. Farmers cultivated the fertile land surrounding the city while craftsmen produced pottery, textiles, metal tools, and jewelry. Trade continued to bring goods from distant regions, making Babylon a cosmopolitan center where languages, cultures, and traditions mixed together. Babylonian scholars também desempenharam papel crucial na preservação e promoção do conhecimento. Priests and scribes studied astronomy, mathematics, and medicine. They observed the movements of the stars and planets, recording detailed astronomical data that would influence scientific traditions for centuries. Babylonian mathematicians developed sophisticated numerical systems and methods of calculation, including early concepts that would later influence geometry and algebra. Their records written on clay tablets have provided historians with valuable insight into how ancient societies understood the world around them. Despite its immense power, Babylon's dominance would not last forever. In 539 BC, the Persian king Cyrus the Great led an army into Mesopotamia and captured Babylon with relatively little resistance. Instead of destroying the city, Cyrus incorporated it into the Persian Empire and allowed many of its traditions and institutions to continue. Babylon remained an important administrative and cultural center for generations, but it gradually declined as new political powers rose elsewhere. Over centuries, the once great city slowly fell into ruin. Rivers changed course, buildings collapsed, and the population moved to other regions. By the time of the medieval period, much of Babylon had disappeared beneath layers of sand and earth. Yet its legacy never vanished. Archaeologists began excavating the ruins in the 19th century, uncovering fragments of walls, temples, tablets, and sculptures that revealed the scale and sophistication of the ancient city. Today, the ruins of Babylon lie in modern-day Iraq, reminding the world of a civilization that helped shape law, science, architecture, and urban life. The story of Babylon is not simply the story of a city. It is the story of how human societies organize themselves, build systems of governance, develop culture, and pursue knowledge. From its early days as a small settlement on the Euphrates to its transformation into a monumental imperial capital, Babylon represents one of the most important chapters in the history of civilization. Around 600 BC, standing within its towering walls and walking along its processional roads, a visitor would have seen a city unlike any other in the world. Temples rose toward the sky, markets buzzed with activity, and scholars studied the heavens. Babylon was not only a center of power, but also a symbol of human ambition and creativity. Even thousands of years later, its name continues to evoke images of ancient grandeur, reminding us that some cities shape history in ways that echo far beyond their time.